Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of Jumpstart Lightning. I'm here with Carl De Winter from Dexmock. Hi, Carl. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
I'm doing great. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Karel de Winter. I'm an Azure MVP and also cloud solution architect working at Dexmag. So Dexmag is a Belgian company and a Belgian IT services integrator, and we are born in cloud. So that means that we only focus on Azure technology and implementing Azure services with our customers and helping them to onboard and use even more of that cloud environment and management for them. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we love to hear about partners using Azure. So tell me a little bit more about how you're using Azure Arc with some of your customers.
Yeah. So with Azure Arc, we can do a simplified management of customer resources that are on-prem or even in another cloud. So we can have our standardized operations, but also our compliancy checks that we do in one way, in one uniform way. So first of all, we are using Azure Lighthouse for that to onboard customers and have like one pane of glass to see every customer in one management plane. And then we can manage not only one cloud or one cloud that the customer is in, but that can be many clouds. And also very important, that also can be on-premises environment that are enabled through Azure Arc. So first of all, every VM gets onboarded through Arc-enabled service, and we not only manage the service itself, but we do also the SQL servers through Azure Arc. But we have to face it here that I think every customer is running workloads on SQL Server. So for that, those workloads can even be in any environment, like on-prem and any cloud. And in that way, we can have like one governance policy to rule both, so the on-prem environment and the Azure resources. So we have like our foundation of Azure policies, but also for monitoring, alerts, and integrating Security Center and alerts on Security Center. And we specifically use Jumpstart to get the scripts to install the agents that are needed to have like the on-prem environment onboarded into Azure. So, for example, the log analytics agent or the agents that are using the Arc extension, we use the scripts to install those agents specifically on the on-prem servers. And then we can, for example, create SQL assessments and send the data to a log analytics workspace, for example. But that's not the only thing. We have also customers that want to bring their modern cloud native development techniques. And I think that's where Kubernetes comes into play, right? So those customers want to use the SQL Server capabilities, but they don't want to manage them themselves. And for that, we advise them to use their own Kubernetes environment, and on top of that, run the Azure Data Services. And those Azure Data Services could be like a SQL Managed Instance, for example, and that's all enabled through Azure Arc. And I think we find it pretty cool, and I think a lot of service providers and integrators are finding that also very cool. So we can give the customers the flexibility to run workloads on-prem and in a multi-cloud environment using, for example, their own Kubernetes environment. So I think the choice of infrastructure here is unlimited, and I think personally that will cover basically every application that you can run everywhere now, I think.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. And it's great to hear how you're having customers. Some of them are used to running, basically SQL IaaS virtual machines. Doesn't matter where those virtual machines are. You're able to pull those in with Arc and manage them through a single pane of glass. On the flip side, you've got your cloud native customers that are running, Kubernetes clusters pretty much anywhere, still able to leverage things like SQL Managed Instance on top of those clusters. Again, single pane of glass, all through Azure Arc. That's really cool. You mentioned you use the Jumpstart for some scripts and things like that. Tell me about some of the automation that you're building out based on either the Jumpstart or some of your own in-house libraries.
Yeah, so we are working with our own like I said, yeah, ARM template library. So we have a bunch of ARM templates, but also scripts that we use to onboard customers and to deploy resources in an Azure environment. But now we need also scripts and templates to deploy things to the on-prem environment with our customers. And that's why we use specifically that Jumpstart library and examples and scripts to have that into our own library, so we can tweak a little bit. Maybe we can use it in another way to onboard our customers, and yeah, just keep on with our own foundation, own policies, own monitoring sets, and expand that with the things that you can find on the Jumpstart library.
That's music to my ears. We love when partners are leveraging the Jumpstart and taking it a step further, even with your own customers. So great to hear that stuff. So as you know, the roadmap for Azure Arc is pretty big. You know, we've recently announced things like Azure App Services to be able to run on any infrastructure through Azure Arc. Tell me, what are you at Dexmoc most excited about in terms of Azure Arc future?
Well, what we see is that, like I said, that application development moves towards a containerized based approach, and the need to orchestrate and manage those resources, it's becoming incredible and important. And I'm very excited about AKS on Azure Stack HCI, because it's very easy to deploy a Kubernetes cluster that is managed by Microsoft and deploy that even on an Azure Stack HCI environment. So for those that not know what Azure Stack is, Azure Stack HCI is it's a newest member of the Azure Stack portfolio, and it's a hyper-converged infrastructure solution. So, and the good news with Azure Stack HCI is that it's native integration with Azure. So you just install it, you configure it, and it natively talks to your Azure environment. So for a partner, that's very good, because we can have one billing perspective, for example, and we can implement all those Azure Arc Foundation benefits, like I said, integration with Azure Monitor, applying policies, even site recovery, using Security Center. All those things are natively baked into Azure Stack HCI. And what I'm looking very forward to is having an AKS cluster on your HCI. So customers that have still need to have on-prem environments for their applications that need to be very tight coupled to, for example, a production line, we can advise them now to just go with Azure Stack HCI, implement AKS on top of Azure Stack HCI, and then use the applications that are needed to run there, or even, like we said, run SQL managed instance in there to have a fully compatible SQL environment.
That's really cool. So basically what I'm hearing is, you know, when we think about Azure Arc, there's kind of a spectrum of things you can do. Everything from bring your own infrastructure, which you kind of talked about at the beginning with customers running kind of SQL Server or even SQL on containers anywhere, all the way to kind of modernizing the data center with Azure Stack HCI, fully hyper-converged infrastructure, run Azure, basically full Azure natively anywhere. So that's awesome to see. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
So I'm still working on a proof of concept right now. So where we are trying all those things out into a customer environment and even into a production environment later on. So I'm very excited to have lots of more projects on Azure Arc. But maybe one question for you, Dale: how can I become an Azure Arc Jumpstarter, and how can I contribute to the Jumpstart?
Well, that's a great question. Well, of course, the Azure Arc Jumpstart is an open source project. So you're probably familiar with the Azure Arc Jumpstart.io website. That's, of course, backed by a GitHub repository. It's fully open source. We've had a number of open source or community contributions to develop new scenarios, or to just make feature requests, or even bug fixes that pop up. So feel free to contribute an issue. You can obviously work directly with me, but we'd love to have some of your contributions, and maybe some of the automation that you've built up in-house that you're comfortable sharing would be awesome to include.
Yeah, for sure. We'll do that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the time today. This has been great. Very glad to hear all the great stuff that's happening with Azure Arc over at Dexmoc, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.